Despite my reputation of being a salty gamer, I'm actually a pretty happy guy. Life is pretty fucking ugly when you really think about it, but that's one of the reasons why I love games. Games give anyone the opportunity to tune out the world for a little while and fantasize about new and different wonderful places. They give you a sense of ownership and freedom. Maybe you don't have a lot of money or personal space in the real world, but your in-game stats or your win-loss ratio is yours. In-game interactions with other players are just as real, sometimes more so, than the physical world. These are the things that draw people to gaming and why we all love them and die for them so hard. No matter how bleak or antagonistic life becomes, we can always invest our minds into a better world. Unfortunately, in the case of Titanfall 2, that world is boring as shit. And that's what makes me so salty. I know it's just a beta, and they say betas aren't indicative of finished product. That may be true, and in some circumstances is completely accurate, but betas are far more telling about a game than almost anything. Pre-alpha, closed, invite-only beta? Okay, yeah, things will probably be different by the time it hits store shelves, but an open beta basically screams, here's our almost completely finished product. Give it a whirl just to make sure it doesn't completely fuck up on launch day. Nowadays, betas double as server tests and hype parades. Publishers want to get people talking about the game and make a last push for pre-orders. Yeah, it's a beta, but I'm going into it as, should I buy or pre-order based on what I'm seeing. I want to mention, before I rip Titanfall 2 a new one, that I don't think my opinion should be held towards the single-player campaign. I feel like the bulk of love must have gone into Titanfall 2's single-player, based on the multiplayer gameplay and the amount of promotion the single-player is getting, and it honestly looks awesome. Moreover, I've played a fair few good single-player FPS lately, including Doom, Mirror's Edge, and most surprisingly, Battlefield Hardline. I recently picked up Hardline at a super discounted rate simply out of curiosity. As expected, the multiplayer is a hot mess of stinking garbage, but the single player is surprisingly well laid out, varied, completely enjoyable, and just overall fun. Mirror's Edge Catalyst is another out by EA this year that reviewed poorly, but I found it to be a complete blast. It kept the spirit of the original Mirror's Edge while doing new things in a compelling way. The majority of complaints were based around its lack of content, rote story, and limited mechanics, which were the exact same criticisms of the first Mirror's Edge, both of which are excellent. Respawn might be bringing the pain with Titanfall 2's single-player campaign, and considering it's from Modern Warfare vets, no doubt it will at least be interesting. So for now, we'll keep the single-player in the back of our minds. Let's discuss what's at hand in the multiplayer beta. First and foremost, god dang it does this game look drab. I legit feel like I'm playing Call of Duty. Everything feels gray and low contrast. The skies are empty and faceless, washed out, perpetually depressing in a state of looks like rain. This totally sucks, and to me it feels like it drains any and all personality out of the thing. The original Titanfall had some bleak looking maps, true, but it also had lots of bright, colorful cities and landscapes that made the world feel like more than a burnout section of Detroit slum. More than anything else, this pisses me off. Not just because it makes the game feel flat and colorless, but because if I wanted to play Call of Duty, I'd be playing Call of Duty. If you put this in any Call of Duty of the last 4 years next to each other, the only difference would be the giant mechs, which also look poop brown and boring. Put this next to something like Battlefield 3, 4, or even 1, and you'd need sunglasses. I know it's from ex-Call of Duty devs, but hasn't the COD ship sailed already? Are we going back in time? Or what? Speaking of going back in time, what the hell year is it that we haven't figured out how spawns work? It's the typical Call of Duty spawn system. Either A, spawn in a random corner of the map so far from anything you'll die before you see someone. Prepare to be spawn trapped, by the way. B, spawn directly in the middle of the action, right in front of some guy who's been camping or directly in front of several mechs. Or C, spawn directly in front of the guy who just killed you while he's trying to get away. Basically, either shoot some guy in the back or get shot in the back as soon as you spawn. When mixed with the atrociously awful maps, you've got a real snooze fest. Not only do the maps look boring, they're laid out even worse. At any point, the maps are either completely empty, usually around the outer edges, or stuffed to the brim with convoluted building layouts, usually in the middle. This makes map traversal boring because you're either running through an empty field or constantly getting stuck and going in different directions, trying to parkour yourself into an open doorway. Almost everything unique and interesting about the original game's maps have been completely forgotten in an effort to put the gaming audience to sleep or drive them to frustration. The grappling hook, one of the most interesting additions to Titanfall 2, seems almost useless because there's either too much shit or not enough shit to actually swing off of. Worse still are dead zones, literal spots in the middle of the maps not marked on the minimap that if you happen to walk into you get a warning to turn back or die. Or the fact that the maps aren't even built for the mechs, and there are tons of doorways that look like you're allowed to go through until you try and find an invisible wall. None of this actually matters though. You won't have time to enjoy the maps because the game mechanics themselves are too frustratingly broken. I haven't yet tried the pilot-only mode, but the other mode, Bounty Hunt, is so confusingly thrown together you wonder what the devs were smoking when they thought it up. The object is not actually to kill enemy players. The object is to kill the grunts, mechs, and specters that show up in waves. I've played this a ton, and despite squinting and scrutinizing as hard as I cannot understand how sometimes when you kill a grunt, it fills 20% of your mech drop meter, and other times you'll kill 10 of them and it'll only fill up 15%. This leads to some really confusing situations where players, sometimes you but mostly the enemy team, will kill 1 or 2 grunts in the first 30 seconds of the match and get a mech before the first wave is half over. From there, it's a crap storm. If you got the mech first, all you have to do is camp the drop pods, preventing the other team from killing any of the grunts, and it virtually locks them out of calling their own mechs. For whatever ridiculous reason, killing grunts grant you serious mech drop bar, but player kills only give about 5%. That means once all the grunts are gone, the enemy team won't be able to get enough kills to actually summon their own mechs to contest yours. I've played many games where one team will have between 3 to 5 mechs, and the other team can do nothing except get spawn camped until the next wave starts, and hopefully they spawn near it. I've played plenty of games where the enemy team has mechs in the first minute of the match, but 5 minutes in, I'm still around 60% drop charge on my first one. Don't bother spawning in it though, as it'll be sure to drop you in a corner sandwich between 2 enemy mechs with a full core charge. Also, fuck Scorch. Its basic attack does so much ungodly damage it can 2-shot a mech before it even touches down. I've literally seen mechs drop from the sky, landing their bubble with 10% HP. Equally confusing is how it hands out points. Again, trying as absolutely hard as I can, I simply cannot fathom how some players end the match with an insane score. Most matches will have one team 2,000 to 3,000 points that they had the entire time, making it unwinnable and depressing, and I cram to understand exactly how it happens. The match will end and there will be one person on the winning team who has a handful of kills but 3 times the score of the next 2 people. I'll have the same number of kills, spend the match killing grunts, depositing cash, and destroying mechs, but I'll end with less than 500 points, while they have a miraculous 2,500 points. Someone will pipe up and say, it's the bounties, you have to kill them. Yeah, I have. It's random as fuck. Sometimes a bounty will give you 600 points, sometimes 200, and of course it only matters who gets the last hit on bounty titans, so if you're in a titan and the enemy team isn't, guess who's gonna get the bounty? It could all be glitches, unfinished, or errant code, but this is one of my biggest issues with the first Titanfall. I'm not usually one to complain about the mysterious and all-encompassing netcode, but for the record, my internet's pretty stellar. According to speedtest.net, it's better than 80% of the US. However, just like the first Titanfall, the game itself doesn't feel laggy, but there are constant WTF moments that make no sense. Shots that give you hit markers and sounds, but don't do life bar damage. The number of times I've had people run along behind me shooting while my minimap radar told me an enemy was in front of me couldn't be counted on both hands. A guy will pop up strafing around a corner and you'll drop dead, while in the kill cam it shows the guy running out in the open like an idiot and shooting at you for a good half second. Random melee attacks that launch at you like Modern Warfare 2 Commando, and other melee attacks that hit and give you a grunting noise but don't kill. It feels exactly like Call of Duty. Ugly color palette, convoluted maps, crud spawns, dumbass kill streaks, broken mechanics, shitty netcode, and everything. Yes, again, I get that it was made by Call of Duty devs, but Titanfall 1 didn't feel this Call of Duty. What's more, don't the suits understand that people who want to play Call of Duty are actually playing Call of Duty? Why would I want a cheap sci-fi imitation when I could just, you know, play Call of Duty? Speaking of sci-fi shooters, the Infinite Warfare trailer looks pretty good right about now, doesn't it? Titanfall 2 feels like it could have been one of the yearly COD releases, and probably should have been. If it had, I wouldn't be giving it such a hard time. I mean, nobody really expects much from Call of Duty these days, do they? The irony is that Titanfall 2 isn't even a good Call of Duty. I was confused at first why EA was releasing Titanfall 2 a week apart from Battlefield 1. Anyone could see what a terrible decision that is, but after playing it I totally understand. It's obvious the higher ups at EA didn't think too highly of the finished product and weren't worried about it competing with Battlefield 1. They also had to release it now because if they waited until November it would have been nothing more than the other space Call of Duty this holiday season. Well, I guess, RIP. Till I see you guys again, I'll be in my office if you have questions.